Hello. My name is Edward, and in this video we're going to talk about learning objectives and creating learning objectives when you're lesson planning. So we're going to cover what is a learning objective, how we can create an effective learning objective, and how we can write a learning objective statement in this video. Okay, let's get started. So what is a learning objective? Well, it is a statement which describes a learning outcome in terms of student behavior. A good objective is specific, observable, and measurable. So have a look at the pictures down here. Now, the student is holding the bow and arrow, and it's the student's job to hit the target. Now, the teacher is the person who is holding the target. So the teacher can choose where the target is and how difficult the target is to hit. But it's the student's job to hit the target. Okay, so that's really important when you're thinking about objectives, that it's the student who should hit the target, not the teacher. So in this video, we're going to talk about student learning objectives, SLO. Okay, so when you see SLO, that's what it means, a student learning objective. Now let's have a look at a bad learning objective. And here are some quotes. I will teach my students math. So why is this a bad objective? Okay, well, it's from the teacher's perspective, right? The next one, my students will know the answer to this. Okay, it's not very clear. So these are unclear. They need to be more specific. And also the first one is from the teacher's perspective, not from the student's perspective. So here's another example. And again, this is for math. So a good learning objective. By the end of the lesson, students will answer 15 sums using addition by finishing this worksheet. So this objective statement, this is specific, and it describes what the students will do, the skills they will use, and a task they need to complete using those skills. So this will prove that the students have learned addition. Okay, so this is a good learning objective statement because of these reasons. So a good learning objective is SMART. And SMART is an acronym. I think it's from the business field. And this acronym means specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. So a good learning objective is SMART, and it achieves all of these 5 aspects. So a good learning objective is also observable. So what do we mean by observable? Observable student behavior is an action we can see or hear. Okay, so an observable objective means that we can see our students completing this objective. For example, a teacher asks, "Do you understand?" And the student says, "Yes." Now, can the teacher observe that the student understands? No. Did the student demonstrate that they understand? No. So for this reason, we use action verbs when creating a student learning objective. We need to use verbs that we as teachers can observe our students doing these things, okay? Understand is not an observable behavior. We can't see our students understanding. So, when should we make a student learning objective? Well, first thing you need to do is choose the target language. For example, for a speaking lesson, we would need to choose the target language first. Or for a listening or reading text, for a listening or reading lesson, we need to know the text that we're going to use. So we need to do that first. We need to know the language that we're teaching or know the language that's in the text. Second, we can now create the student learning objective. We can make the statement related to the lesson plan. And then third, Now you can plan the lesson. So the student learning objective is achieved at the end of your lesson. And it's important to know the end of the lesson because that will help you to know the steps of how to get there. For example, when you get in a car to drive somewhere, we need to know where we are going first. Okay, we need to know the final destination when we get in the car to be able to plan our journey, to know the steps that we're going to take on our journey. Okay, so that's why it's important when we're lesson planning to choose the target language first and create the objective. Okay, and then we can start planning the steps in our lesson. We can't plan the steps in our lesson without knowing the objective and the target language. Okay, so what do we need to think about when we create a student learning objective? We need to know the student's level and ability. We need to know the amount of class time we have. We need to choose appropriate and relevant language. And we need to think about how we're going to assess our students' success in completing the objective. Okay, so think about SMART, the acronym that we learned about a few slides ago. So how do we prepare students to succeed in reaching the student learning objective? Well, there's a few answers. The first is scaffolding, okay? So this is the support and the steps that we're going to break down the task and help our learners to complete step by step to get to the final objective. Also, controlled practice is something we can do in the beginning stages of the lesson and the middle stages of the lesson before we give our students the freedom to achieve the task by themselves. Okay, so now let's talk about writing student learning objectives. Now, here are two columns of verbs. What is the difference between the verbs in the left column and the verbs in the right column according to learning objectives? So think about observable behavior. Which verbs are observable? And which column of verbs are the correct verbs to use when we're writing student learning objectives? Okay, so the answer is the left column are action verbs. These are verbs that we can observe. We can see our students doing these things. The columns on the right are not observable behaviors. Okay, understand, appreciate, learn, and know. We can't see these things. We can't measure these things. Okay, we can't measure our students' understanding, appreciation, learning, and knowing. Okay, so it's better to use action verbs. These are verbs that the teacher can observe. So here's an example of an expression that shows why it is important to use action verbs. Now, this gentleman here says, "I know Korean." Now, what does this mean? What does it mean, "I know Korean," right? We don't know what level he is. Maybe he can say one word. Maybe he's fluent. Maybe he can read Hangul. Maybe he just knows one or two expressions. Okay. The word know is not a very specific, clear, and accessible aspect or verb to use. So there are some expressions in green. I can read and write Hangul. I can ask and answer simple questions when I'm shopping. Okay, so these are more clear expressions. Read and write Hangul, that's more specific. And ask and answer simple questions when I'm shopping. Okay, so this gives us more specific information about how much Korean he knows. Okay, so here is the formula for writing a speaking lesson student learning objective. Okay, so this is the formula we can use when we are writing the statement for a student learning objective. By the end of the lesson, students will be able to use this target language. Okay, so we need to put our target language in there by completing this task. So the green sections there we need to change, and we need to add our specific target language and the task that our students are going to achieve. Okay, so you can see at the bottom here in blue, here is an example of a speaking lesson student learning objective. By the end of the lesson, students will be able to ask and answer about the time using what's the time, it's o'clock, by doing a role play, calling friends in different countries and asking the time. So you can see from this example, it's specific about exactly what the students are going to learn, the target language that they're going to use, and the task that they're going to complete to show they know the target language. Here's an example of a student learning objective for a listening or reading lesson. By the end of the lesson, students will be able to comprehend name of the text by completing this task. Okay, it's a little bit different. And at the bottom, there is an example of a listening lesson student learning objective in blue. By the end of the lesson, students will be able to comprehend the story Brown Bear by doing the animal actions while listening to the song. Okay, so you can see here, it's clear about what is the text we're going to use and also the task that students are going to complete to show that they understand the listening material. Okay, so here is a student learning objective quiz. Have a look at these examples. By the end of the lesson, students will be able to ask and answer about their dream jobs using what do you want to be? I want to be a designer, marine biologist, dentist, by completing a class survey. Okay, so have a look here. What color are the examples of the target language? Have a look at the SLO. Where is the target language? What color is the fluency activity? And what color are the action verbs and the topic? Okay, so the examples of the target language are green. The fluency activity is in orange. And the action verbs and the topic are in purple or pink. Okay, so you can see the components there of the objective statement more clearly. Okay, here is another example. By the end of the lesson, students will be able to order food and drinks in a restaurant for themselves and friends, using language such as, what do you want to eat? My friend will have soup. Can you bring water, please? By doing a restaurant role play with a waiter. Okay, so what color are the action verbs and the topic? What color is the fluency activity? And the examples of the target language, what color are they? Okay, so the action verbs and the topic are yellow. The fluency activity is pink. And the examples of the target language are in blue. Okay, so again, you can see the different components of the objective there. Okay, so have a look at these SLOs and tell me what's wrong with these SLOs. Number one, by the end of the lesson, students will be able to describe an amazing life experience in the past using language such as, I've been to the pyramids, I've seen the Amazon, I've visited the Colosseum, by completing a gap fill. So what's wrong with this SLO? Now remember, this should be for a speaking lesson. There's something wrong with this SLO. Okay, so for a speaking lesson, have a look at the final task. Does that look like a good task for a speaking lesson, completing a gap fill? Right, that's not a good task for a speaking lesson. So When you're writing a student learning objective, the task should be suitable for what you're teaching, and a gap fill is not really a great way to assess or to finish a speaking lesson. Okay, have a look at this student learning objective, number 2. By the end of the lesson, students will be able to describe the people in photographs by doing an information gap activity. What's wrong with this SLO? Okay, well, something is missing. Okay, the answer is that the target language is missing from this SLO. Okay, now if we don't include the target language in the objective, then it's not really clear what we're teaching. And if we look at number 2, the objective, describing people in photographs. Now, what target language are we going to use? Are we going to describe their clothes? Are we going to describe their facial features or how they look? Okay, are we going to compare them using comparatives? It's not really clear from this objective exactly what is the target language. So it's really important to know exactly what is your target language before you start planning your lesson. Okay, so remember, you need an action verb and a topic, examples of the target language, and the fluency activity that's suitable for your lesson. Okay, so let's finish off with a review. An SLO is a statement made by the teacher during the lesson planning stage. However, the statement is not about what the teacher will do. The plan is made from the perspective of what the student will achieve. The plan includes the language the students will use, or the listening or reading text that they will comprehend. And it also includes the activity that the students will complete at the end of a lesson. Okay, so when you're lesson planning, think about your student learning objective statement and make sure it's very clear about the target language and the task that students are going to complete at the end of the lesson. So I hope this video has been useful for you thinking about objectives, and I hope you've learned some new things about planning with objectives for your lessons. Okay.